Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Week That Was. I am Saeed Khan, broadcasting from the winter wonderland that is Detroit now. We finally got some measurable snow, except it was heart attack snow if any of you were trying to shovel it, really thick and gloppy. But actually, my snowblower kept clogging up, so I had to kind of shut it off first and then stick my hand in and do all that. But hope you are safe and warm as I am right now. But we have another momentous.
Is that as scary as sticking your hand in the garbage disposal to clean it out?
That's bad.
Turn it off first.
That's bad. I think either of them though is still better than what fared Mr. Jeremy Renner. Hearing the reports of 14,000-pound snowcat going over him. I don't know how he survived, but I think they should just give him the Marvel franchise forever because he's a true superhero on that. So we have with us, joining us, attorney Steve Fishman. We have 910 AM radio host Adolph Mongo, sporting a fine beard. We have veteran journalist Nancy Derringer, and of course we have co-founder of Deadline Detroit, Allan Lengel. So here we go.
And we have a little shout out to Michael Aceto.
Hi, Michael.
Our former director.
Yes, so good to hear from you, man. Miss you too. So I know that this is still January. We're in the lead up to Valentine's Day next month, but it looks like somebody's already sent their Valentine out. Former President Donald Trump has picked Matt DePerno as his endorsement for the Michigan Republican chair.
Love forever. Yes. Love you, Matt.
Put that heart up in front. Yes. Think about this. I mean, first of all, DePerno himself vying for the chair. What does it say about the Michigan Republican Party? And then second of all, is this endorsement going to help or hurt Mr. DePerno?
It's a shit show.
I think it's going to help. I think he's going to get it because there's people vying for that position. I think it also says that the Republicans don't give a shit. They're going to double down on a losing hand.
Well, I
wait
think
for the
it was
Democrats.
Jeff Timmer 2 weeks ago who predicted that it would be DePerno. I think he's probably right. And it is great news for Democrats because that guy is not going. I mean, from what I understand, the primary job of the party chairman is to raise money. And I wouldn't give Matt DePerno a quarter for a parking meter. And I can't believe any other Republicans would either. I mean, the guy is he's not ready for prime time. And so it's going to be interesting to see how far down this road of loserdom they want to go. And, God love him.
Well,
Poor John.
It's a gift that keep on giving. If you look at what's happening here in Michigan and look at the Republicans around the country, man, if the Democrats don't take advantage of all this chaos in the party, you got Ron DeSantis in Florida, you got Abbott in Texas, and you got Lake in Arizona. These are the nuts votes of a dysfunctional Republican Party. And now you got this guy going to be the chair here.
I think the Republicans just don't know when to let go. I mean, clearly Trump screwed it up in Michigan. I mean, there was a blue tsunami here because of Trump. He picked the craziest, the most unelectable people. And, particularly the DePerno race. I mean, Tom Leonard, the former Speaker of the House, could have beat Dana Nessel. She was beatable, but they picked the worst person possible so that she had a comfortable victory.
Well, I mean, to borrow from a movie of the past, it seems as though the Republican Party still can't quit Donald Trump. Cue the music for Brokeback Mountain right now. But there was a recent poll that showed that for the first time, Biden seems vulnerable to a Trump candidacy. Now, of course, we're still a couple of years out from the actual election day, but elections have already started in many ways with the campaigns getting going. At the same time, Trump seems to be having an awful lot of trouble jump-starting his own campaign. Reports show that out of Iowa, he's really foundering. Again, it seems as though the Republican Party, as Adolph described it, is having its issues. Can't really decide what it wants. A bit of an identity crisis, perhaps. Here in Michigan, you mentioned that Republicans might not want to give any money, but who really does give money to the Republican Party? I mean, I'm not sure. Is it really the rank and file, or is it just a few deep pockets on the west side of the state and maybe a couple of counties on our side?
Well, I don't know about the state level, and I've never done any research on this, but I mean, the conventional wisdom is that social media and various technologies associated with it, like PayPal and so forth, have made it easy for people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert and even Donald Trump to rise to the top on a pile of $25 checks. That they don't get the big dollars that you might get from, Dan Gilbert or whoever, but they can. Excuse me.
I say the DeVosses.
The DeVosses, exactly. But they can still be competitive on the fact, based on the fact that they're coming into people's Twitter and Rumble and Facebook and everything else every day asking for money. And, these proles can spare a few dollars, and they do, and it adds up. But I don't think you can run a state party organization on that. I mean, I think the big story about this particular upcoming convention in February is that for the first time ever, they have to charge people to attend, charge delegates to attend, something like $50. And, they've never had to do that before, but they simply don't have the money to do it. Now, if they don't have the money to run their own convention, which is, I don't know what it costs to run a state convention. Maybe Adolph can say, I'd imagine it's in the low six figures.
It's a lot of money. And the Republicans, they decided to piss on Betsy DeVos, who in the past have written a lot of checks. These people pay a lot of money. They go to people like her. When Matty Maroon was alive, he gave a lot of money to both sides of the fence. But I don't see those folks giving not one penny.
Right.
Mitt Romney got brother-in-laws and cousins here, Jim Nicholson. All these folks have put a lot of money into the Republican Party and paid the conventions and caucus meetings and whatever.
Well, apart from the fact that I can't unsee that image you just said, Adolph, about Betsy DeVos, it seems as though this is an issue happening on two levels. I mean, even on the national RNC level, Ronna Romney McDaniels is having an awful lot of trouble. She's facing real opposition from a Trumpista from California, Harmeet Dillon, who seems to be all in with MAGA, interesting as an Indian American immigrant. But the fact that this identity crisis is happening on both the national and here on the state level in Michigan really is something. And if you are saying that it's about raising money, who really is in the position to be the carnival barker and be able to draw in some of those big bucks?
I think Ronna Romney still has a standing there. I think she's going to get it. I mean, the My Pillow guy wants that the RNC chair as well, which would be great. That would be a lot of fun. But I think she's going to get it. She's been walking a tightrope with Trump for so long. If you talk to people in the party, she knows the whole election thing was bullshit. But she's had to accommodate Trump along the way, and I think she's going to be able to navigate this. Her loyalty to Trump and her loyalty to the party, and it's a lot of money. She's got a big ego. She knows how to navigate that party, and I think she'll
but
end up.
She has a losing record. I mean,
yes,
this is
no question.
This is the other thing. I mean, they've lost the last two cycles, and she's saying. elect me for
three.
some more losing. Yeah, exactly.
really
some more
3
losing.
cycles.
And it's just
Yeah.
like, I mean, it's really interesting watching this happen, because it's like when your good friends are divorcing and you're hearing from both sides, and it's, I don't know, it's fascinating. And I think it's one of those lessons that the Democrats should learn as well, which is that kind of factionalism never leads anywhere.
Well, the fact that you mentioned Marjorie Taylor Greene, it seems like she might be vying for Trump's VP slot. I mean, bring out the popcorn from now.
I think Carrie Lake is a little bit more sophisticated. I think she might be a stronger choice for him. I think even Trump knows that Marjorie Taylor Greene's fucking crazy. So I have a question for Steve Fishman. How do you assess all the criminal cases that are out there right now, and how do you assess the document case now that Biden and Pence have kind of gone into it? Where do you see that all going?
I think I've said from the beginning of all of this that the strongest case is in Georgia. I still believe that's the strongest case. I've read some of the articles where some of these guys say, "Oh, but you got to prove this." No, you don't. You got his own voice, and you can hear his tone in his voice. And it's the most powerful evidence, as I've told you guys many times.
Yes.
The most powerful evidence there is your own voice. Okay, that's why wiretap evidence kills criminal defendants, particularly the guys in the streets, because you can't explain it away. And if this guy wanted to get on the witness stand and try to explain it away, I mean, that's a cross-examiner's delight to have a liar like that guy on the witness stand. How do I see the documents? I think the document case is blown. And I think the reason, not that he's not guilty as hell, he's guilty as hell. But I think that what's happened with Biden and just the discovery of, well, there's some in the Corvette, now there's some in the office, now there's some, I don't know, buried in the ground like a guy from the South does with his money, you know.
Yeah.
And now Pence comes up with stuff. I think the more interesting question there, and I've read some commentators who have said this, I'd love to know how really classified and how really secret some of these things are. Because I get the feeling, I never worked in government, I can't speak on it from any personal knowledge, but it sure seems like there's an awful lot of stuff that gets stamped classified or secret or whatever the hell it is.
Well, Alan, I think you might have some clips about this.
Well, yeah. Speaking of that,
2023 is going, but it has not been going well for President Joe Biden. Just when we were ready to move on to the next scandal, the FBI searched his house for 13 hours on Friday, and they found even more classified documents. At this point, the FBI is just decluttering Biden's house for him.
there's one other one.
Home. Then they got thrown for yet another loop when classified documents were also found at the home of former Vice President Mike Pence. Some Republicans responded to the news by just throwing their hands up and saying, screw it, like Lindsey Graham, who, instead of making a political point, decided to just make a joke.
You got Trump, you got Pence, you got Biden. The only thing I think you'll find at my house is a bunch of Chick-fil-A bags on the floor.
Okay, but in fairness, there's a good chance those were stolen from the Trump White House, too. It would not surprise me if Trump wrote classified on every fast food box that came through there.
This reminds me of that Talladega Nights scene where they're sitting down for dinner and they got Domino's, Taco Bell, and Arby's. I mean, this is, haute dining. So, and from what I understand, that's what was there in the White House. So, I mean, there's clearly, it seems, a distinction that we know right now between Pence and Biden on the one side and Trump on the other when it came to intent to keep it hidden, to not cooperate with the authorities. Is that a fine enough legal line in this case, Steve, or is there something here about sort of strict liability and they're on the hook?
Well, I think that anybody that's really paying a lot of attention to it, and you got to keep in mind that doesn't necessarily mean it's a large segment of the population. Anybody that's paying a lot of attention to it can see for sure that they're completely different situations in terms of how they responded to the finding of them or to even the taking of them. That part's for real. But I don't think Garland helped matters any by appointing a special prosecutor in the Biden case, because it makes it too easy for almost all non-lawyers, for instance, or non-political people like you guys who pay attention to all this stuff. They say, oh, look at that. You got to have a special prosecutor for him too. He must have done something wrong. And I saw a statistic, was it 30% of even Democrats? I saw some statistic that said that they equated the two, 30%, I think, of the public. equated Trump and Biden because, well, they got a special prosecutor for this one and a special prosecutor for that one.
Yeah.
Well, there's another
Bellata, I was
Go
going
ahead.
to say last week, Michael Bellata probably put it best when he said, there's certainly a distinction there, but a jury may not be able to make that distinction.
What about the idea that the Democrats who are equating this don't want to see Biden run in 24? And yeah, Adolph.
It falls right into their lap. The progressive people that don't like Biden, don't like Harris. This is a great opportunity to sweep them to the side. They're saying Grandpa got to go. Take the keys from him. He can't drive anymore. And so this is a tremendous opportunity for those folks in the party. You see it in California. They all jumping in a race to run against Dianne Feinstein.
Yeah.
They saying she's too old. She's got dementia. All the other things they throwing out there. So look at Arizona. So they ready to pounce on Biden. Let him step aside. You did a great job. You delivered the Senate for us. Now we need to keep this office. So yeah, Biden in some trouble, whether it's deserving or not.
I think it doesn't help, frankly, that he doesn't have a strong vice president. I think Kamala Harris, I think she's had problems. If you talk to people in Washington, she's had people, I know people who know her, say she's lost a lot of her staff. Her staff, has a hard time working for her. Biden has described her as a work in progress. She's just not seen as a very strong vice president. It's not the first time. I mean, the majority of vice presidents, don't win when they run. But I think if there was really a stronger vice president, people might feel a little bit more comfortable with Biden going second term.
She has a guy that worked for her from Detroit, and he said it was chaos. He left after 7 months in her office.
Oh yeah.
So say she doesn't have a clue of what's going on in D.C. or any place else.
Wow. Well, Nancy, I mean, the news for Biden, at least, and some would say by extension, the country, is pretty good this morning. The economy grew by 2.9%, which is better than what was expected. Unemployment is pretty low. Yes, inflation is still up, but a lot of economists... It's
way down from its height. It's at about 6% now?
Exactly. Yeah, and it looks like it's still heading in a downward trajectory. We're not Turkey by a long shot. So these are good numbers for him. Is it getting the coverage that it deserves? And if not, why not? And is it enough that people will remember this in a year or so when the election really picks up steam?
Well, the first part of your question is difficult to answer. Is it getting the coverage it deserves? If you're paying attention to the news, yes, you're reading these stories in, legit newspapers. Unfortunately, a large part of the population is kind of like Lengel in that they have cable news on all day, every day.
I read the papers too.
I know you do, but you also are a cable news guy. You've got a lot. You watch a lot more TV than I do. And I think I watch too much TV. But
does that make you better than me?
Yeah, I think I am better than you. Anyway, if they're Fox viewers, they have Fox on, and this is not a new phenomenon. We've known about this for a while. Fox all day, and if they're watching Fox, they're not hearing about the positive trajectory. They might just give it a little bit of lip service at the top of the hour, but then they go to one of the screaming hosts who is on about something else, whatever the hot story of the day that makes Democrats look bad. So it's hard to say. I mean, I read a really good newsletter. I was delayed in the Newark airport 5 hours last weekend, and I did a lot of reading, and I read a really good newsletter by a pretty much unknown journalist arguing for why Biden should not run in 24. And she convinced me. And, what we need to do, she said, is have an open primary, because let Biden stand in the fire for 2 years, which is what he's going to do anyway. They're going to, the House is going to throw everything they can at him. None of it's going to really, really stick, but let him draw fire, and let's just have it out among the bench of Democratic hopefuls and just get it done.
Who might that be?
Oh, there's a bazillion of them.
Who do you see?
Gretchen Whitmer, Pete Buttigieg, Kamala Harris, although I don't think she's going to be successful. There's, Gavin Newsom in California. I mean, there's a lot of people. Cory Booker. There's
Jared Polis in Colorado. That's the governor that they're talking about the most.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, there's lots of people who are capable of doing this. I just, Biden, for whatever reason, I just don't think I think we have to thank him for his service and tell him it's time to grab the Acela back to Delaware.
But isn't it really simpler than any of this? The business about finding the document. The long and the short of it is, I've said this 10 times on this, but he's too goddamn old.
Yes, that's the other thing. He's too old.
No,
I mean, he's almost 80, right?
He'll be 86 years old. If he were reelected and he lived, he'd be 86. That's insane.
That is insane.
That is insane. In a country of 330 million people, we can't find someone in their 40s or 50s.
You're putting too many conditions on him, Steve. I mean, he has to get elected and he has to live. I mean,
I would say this, Whitmer. I'm not convinced that she's presidential material. I'm convinced she's vice presidential material, but I'm not convinced
either.
that,
my point is she's a plausible hopeful.
And the question becomes, and the question also becomes with like the Colorado governor, he's gay. Yeah, is the country gonna accept that?
We elected a peanut farmer.
It could be we're ready. I don't know. Still waiting for a Jewish president, but that's the very last thing.
No, Allan, not the last thing. There's other demographics here.
Yeah.
I remember when Joe Lieberman was the vice presidential candidate with Gore, and I was in DC and I was listening to C-SPAN radio, and they had two lines, one Republican, one Democrat. So they're like, okay, Republican line, and someone says, I'm worried if Joe Biden or if Joe Lieberman becomes the vice president, they'll change the way we celebrate Christmas. And I wanted to call and say, do you think the Jews are going to fuck with the retail the busiest time of the year? Come on.
I'll put in a vote for Amy Klobuchar. I think probably her biggest liability actually isn't gender, or I think it's actually she's from Minnesota.
I think.
I was going to say temperament may not be strong. I mean, it may have issues, but candidates from Minnesota don't do well either in the Super Bowl or in presidential elections. So I think that might be a little bit of trouble. But she is being talked about. You got Mondale, that Hubert Humphrey. So you definitely have some issues there. But
Cory Booker, Ann Farrell's mentioned. I think Cory Booker could potentially be a strong candidate. He's smart, he's very reasonable, but who knows?
It would be interesting to see how they balance the ticket, either regionally or ideologically, with a Cory Booker, just to keep the Democrats happy.
But these documents give Biden a way out.
Exactly.
But not running, and I think he can't run. And I'm in agreement with Steve. I call him Grandpa. He's great Grandpa. He's done what he's done a great job being an interim president, and we need somebody that's going to be able to serve 2 terms.
Well, and he's going to spend, like I said, he's going to spend the next 2 years. We're going to hear about Hunter Biden's dick pics and crack pipe. We're going to hear about these documents. We're going to hear about, they're probably going to try to impeach him, just for the hell of it, because they can. And it's just, all of this is going to have the effect of turning him into the next Hillary Clinton, where people will say, well, he looks good on paper, but there's just something about him I don't like. And, if Trump runs again, or if Trump is the nominee again, I should say, he is running. We need to put up somebody who is Mr. or Ms. reasonable, and somebody who can say, look, let Trump talk about his rigged election. I want to talk about Medicare for all, or I want to talk about, reforming our healthcare system so we're not an embarrassment on the planet. I mean, somebody who can just bring the focus back to what Washington is supposed to be about, which is policymaking. And,
I think Biden is far more likable than Hillary Clinton. I think she had a likability issue there, but I understand.
But he's a lot older too. I mean, I'm with Steve. He's old and he's showing it.
He is old, but I have to say, his record has not been bad during this, his first couple of years.
No, it hasn't. But again, he's old. So,
by the way, just as a clarification, when Nancy said Hunter Biden's crack pipe, I don't think that was a metaphor. I think that was an actual crack pipe.
We were talking about his crack pipe and his penis.
That's right.
There
yeah.
You go.
So, Adolph.
Yeah. Listen, the worst case scenario is at a debate and Biden go to sleep. He's standing there and he dozes off. Yeah, he listen, the guy is losing it a little bit. You can see they propping him up.
Yeah, Steve.
And just sent in a question saying, isn't he going to be indicted? And I absolutely believe he's going to be indicted in Georgia, just what I've been saying. I think that they're going to announce it. I read what Ms. Willis said to the judge. I think she's absolutely right. I got a feeling from reading, because keep in mind, I don't watch TV, so I don't see anything that people who are inside the place that actually are talking about it. I got a feeling that the judge was kind of looking at her. No, I don't know if we're going to do that or not, but they're going to indict him in Georgia. There's no doubt in my mind.
He can still run.
Yeah, of course he can still run, but he'll be running he'll be running. Actually, if they indict him quickly, I mean, they try to stall stuff around, but you guys got to remember, if they brought the case in federal court having to do with January 6th or having to do with the documents, you're going to start up with all these crazy motions, blah, blah, blah. The case in Georgia is a finite, simple case. It has nothing to do with people going to Washington and marching in Washington, or people hiding stuff or not hiding it, or blah, blah, blah. This is a very simple, straightforward case. By doing what he did, which we have you talking about, you obstructed justice, or the various statutes that they have in Georgia. Yes, I believe he's going to be indicted, and I believe it's going to be soon. And I think he's not going to be the only one, by the way.
Giuliani, Mark Meadows, possibly.
That Meadows, of all people, Meadows would be fantastic.
Sidney Powell.
Over the text himself, he said not only is he an asshole, but he's a dumb asshole.
May I pass along a little bit of scurrilous gossip that I heard yesterday?
Oh, yes, please.
Okay. It was, I have an acquaintance who recently changed jobs in New York City and now works in a pretty fancy office building in New York. And she said that Rudy Giuliani passes through quite often. And according to the security guard, he no longer ties his shoes. So I think the alcoholism and the dementia is definitely starting to really chip away at his facility with keeping himself dressed. So there you go.
Or maybe he's trying to effectuate a fall. And,
they see people yelling at Mr. Mayor, you got to keep it together, tie your shoes. Oh, well, sorry.
So Trump is, as Steve said, probably going to get indicted, and he's going to try to cook up the court of public opinion. And one of the ways that might become a little bit easier is a word that Meta is letting him back on Facebook and Instagram. And it seems as though he might also get back onto YouTube. He has been remarkably, quote unquote, disciplined, relatively speaking, to himself in his rants. But will he unleash his own native Kraken with this?
I just want to say one thing. Oh, go ahead, Steve.
No, go ahead, Dance.
Well, I just want to say one thing. First of all, he has not been disciplined in his rants on his own platform. Okay. I believe he awarded himself the club championship, golf championship this year again, even though he wasn't there for one of the rounds. He claimed that he played on another course and shot a better score and counted that. It was like, this guy is almost unbelievable. And he did a really weird Truth Social rant about it. That's the first thing I want to say. And the other thing is, this is really going to test him, because in order for him to go back to Facebook or Twitter, he will be seen as abandoning Truth Social. And Truth Social is yet another one of his grifts that he's trying to unload on some other sucker who will give him a lot of money for it. And it's going to be interesting to see how that works out. George Santos may buy Truth. Yeah.
You mean take over from Devin Nunes?
Or Kanye West.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, Kanye was supposed to buy Candace Owens' husband's outlet, and that seemed to not work.
I was going to say, Trump needs the major social. He needs Facebook if he's going to run. He needs Twitter. He needs all these platforms, because the Truth platform is not going to do it for him. I mean, he still gets people report on what he says on Truth, but the Facebook, the Twitter, that was really where his energy was and where his personality was, and he wants that back.
Right.
Go ahead, Steve.
I think the initial question didn't have anything to do with whether he was going to be able to pepper Facebook, Twitter, whatever all these things are. The question was, if he's indicted, which I think he will be, will he somehow be able to use, I think what you were saying, Saeed, was he's going to be back on Facebook or wherever the hell he's going to be. Is that going to affect his case? I can tell you guys, and we've talked about this before, there's a couple things that people really need to realize. Again, people who are listening to this, people who watch television, they think that everybody's doing the same thing they're doing. And everybody's very familiar with all these different cases and all this different stuff. It's not true. I've picked enough juries with defendants who were pretty well known. A lot of people are going about their everyday life. They don't know shit from Shinola about what's going on in these various things. That's the first thing. The second thing, you have to remember the judge has some control over how defendants behave when they're on bond. And everybody is on bond of some type. Either you're remanded or you're on a personal bond, but you're under the authority of the court. Okay? So if the court tells you, look, Mr. Defendant Trump, you cannot use any more Facebook. You can't, or I'm going to lock your ass up. The court has control over stuff like that. When we had the Feiger and Ben Johnson case, Jeffrey was told by Judge Borman, because the government objected, that he could not put the certain kinds of billboards and certain kinds of advertisements, because the judge accepted the government's position that he was doing it to advance his own position for our own jury trial. I mean, there's precedent for that. So I'm not concerned what Trump does. I just want him indicted. And then when he's indicted, we'll find 12 people who can be fair. I'm not saying he's going to be convicted for sure, but if he's ever going to be convicted, it's going to be on this case. And you'll have 12 fair people. They know who Donald Trump is. They know about stuff, but you're going to find people and the judge is going to tell them they got to stay off of all social media. That's the rule most of the time. So I'm not concerned.
On this topic of social media, I mean, you see now some events happening around the world, which are social media platforms wielding their influence, and then the pushback that's happening even from governments. Recently in the UK, the BBC, not a social media output, but a legacy media outlet, broadcast a documentary on BBC Two about the 2002 communal riots and violence in Gujarat province of India, where the current Prime Minister Narendra Modi was the chief minister, and essentially linking the fomenting of violence against various communities right to him. The protest was initially that the Indian government tried to get the BBC to stop broadcasting. But what they did do when they weren't successful there is they invoked emergency powers in New Delhi to prohibit any airing of the documentary in India, and in fact prosecuting students who were broadcasting it. Now comes word that the Modi government has pressured Elon Musk to prevent the documentary from being disseminated on Twitter. Is this just going to be the way that it is between social media platforms, who are quite well aware that it's a 1.3 billion consumer market, not wanting to restrict access there? And how is that going to then affect speech and expression?
I think worldwide, you're seeing it in Israel. They're trying to pass some legislation to mute the media whenever there's something that they deem might be a danger to the country. It's nationwide. I mean, the attack on the media, I blame Trump for part of that. I mean, he just had such a successful campaign against the media and portraying. I mean, if you watch some of the rallies, some of the old videos of rallies where he suddenly in the middle of the rally points back to where the press is, and people are screaming at the press, and it's really pretty ugly, and it's a worldwide issue now in democracies.
This sounds like a topic for a classroom at Wayne State rather than, five wisecrackers here on Facebook Live. But I do want to say, I don't know that it's something that I would blame on Trump. I've heard well before Trump, I've heard hair-raising stories about the kind of mobs that can be whipped up via social media. There was, in fact, I think there were some in India where it was, there were, you think of how a rumor, flies around a small town. I mean, that's kind of what Facebook does, is it rather than bring the world together, it divides them into these little pockets. And, pretty soon you've got people marching with torches and pitchforks on somebody. So that's one thing I don't think I would put entirely on Trump.
Well, that's, if you watch more cable TV, Nancy, you would blame it on Trump.
Well, I mean, I think the point is, though, that if you hear some of the rhetoric out of the Modi government, they're using terms like fake news.
Yeah, well, that's definitely him. Yeah.
So that's definitely linked to Trump. I think the two incidents that you were talking about coming out of India were the rumor that a Muslim guy was going out with a Hindu girl and calling it love jihad, and then a Muslim actually daring to eat beef, and that was called the cow jihad. So yes, everything has a jihad to it. But here in the United States, the notion of regulating speech is something that is happening at the state level. Governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, has now banned the Advanced Placement African American Studies exam in Florida schools, and in fact is also restricting African American studies more broadly, claiming that the school districts haven't followed protocol to allow their curricula to be reviewed by the state. But essentially, it seems to be blocking anything which would shed a light on American history that shows slavery was an affront, and that various, even civil rights leaders, cannot be covered in the way that they wanted or that they should be covered under the guise of critical race theory. So is this a sign of the times as well?
Listen, this has been going on forever. How long did it take to pass an anti-lynching bill in Congress? Forever. And while Black people was being strung up in trees, burned, thrown on bonfires, etc., you had those same people. Ron DeSantis just joined a list of folks, John Stennis and Theo Bilbo and Ben Tillman and all these politicians that preach hate, don't want to admit that the Civil War was about slavery, don't want to admit that a lot of these folks, Jim Crow, I guess you can't teach about Jim Crow laws. You can't make white kids feel uncomfortable when you're talking about American history. We have a hard time even talking about African American history. I hear it all the time. African American history. You don't want to go into African American history. You don't want a degree in African American history. Clarence Thomas
Right.
said he didn't want any clerks in his office that major or minored in African American history. So we deal with this all the time. That's why when you're dealing with Black History Month, we get what, a month out of a 12 months. Listen, this is the right time for him to put it on the table, and this is the right time to fight it. I'm glad that this guy is doubling down on let's get rid of African American history. You can't say gay. You can't talk about queers and all this other stuff that he thinks, and it's going to get support. But I don't think going around the country saying all this shit is going to get him elected president. But it's something you got to fight in Florida. The only way to deal with it is to do what we did in South Carolina and these other places. Don't boycott those folks that give them money, those the big businesses, Public and Walmart and those kind of places.
Look, Germany has history about the Holocaust, about the Nazis and stuff like that. It's part of their history. Part of our history is slavery. Part of our history is killing the Indians and stealing all their land. The people are like, why should we make people feel bad about it? They don't have to feel personally bad, but there's some pretty shameful parts of history in this country. I mean, there's a lot of great parts of history. It's like, what do we leave out? Henry Ford. Bill McGraw did a great piece on Henry Ford and all his anti-Semitic publication, his friendship with Hitler. Henry Ford was a great man in a lot of ways, and it was like pretty awful in other ways. What do we just whitewash that, or
Well, I mean, in Germany, it's actually, against the law to deny the Holocaust. And I mean, are we moving toward denying? I know this seems like an extreme position, denying that even slavery happened. I mean, there are certainly people who have gone on the record nonsensically and said that slavery actually wasn't a bad thing.
No, because they fed people, they had a roof under their head, all kind of crazy shit. That you got to hear about. It wasn't that bad. But if someone stole your grandfather's land and sold it to somebody else for $10 million, you took the generational wealth from me out of my pocket. When my uncle fought and flew in World War II, couldn't come back and get a job as a pilot, you stopped a generation of folks from making a living. Racism is bad. It has left a lot of bodies along the trail, and they're still dealing with it. And you got people saying, "Oh, you're just crying. Everything is great. You can't talk about critical race theory." Who's teaching it in kindergarten? Who's teaching it in any of these schools?
Why don't we leave education to educators, and stop trying to meddle? I mean, I don't think any governor should be meddling in the individual curricula of individual school districts.
Well, that's Trump now.
Whitmer too.
Trump just announced that he wants a reform education where parents are going to be able to fire principals and dictate curriculum and all that. Parents should have an input in their schools, but they shouldn't be running the school.
They have input in their schools, and they do know what, if they listen. I had so much more access to the things my daughter was learning when she was in school than my parents ever had for me. I mean, go to parent-teacher conferences, go to back to school nights, look online. All this stuff is online. I mean, this is just such a fucking false. It's just a red herring. But
Adolph, you mentioned that DeSantis may not have like a national appeal on this issue, but it seems as though he's an equal opportunity suppressor. I mean, he's suppressing critical race theory / African American studies. He's suppressing matters of LGBTQ. So you might have somebody out in the hinterland who may be ambivalent about CRT, but is pretty invested in trying to suppress LGBTQ, and will then say, all right, if we got to take it as an all or none, I'd rather go ahead and vote for him. I mean, do you see that being a possibility?
I see it. Well, yeah. You can run an anti-gay movement in a lot of areas in this country, in a lot of states. But I think overall, for him to become, first he got to get past Trump. He's trying to out-Trump Trump. And Trump is not going away unless they lock him up.
Sure.
Down in Atlanta somewhere. But he's not going away. But it plays. His game plan is a great game plan, and he's getting a lot of support, but he's also getting a lot of pushback from folks. He's waking people up. I'm glad it's out there, because we haven't had a problem with education, especially here in Detroit. We're talking about critical race theory. Shit, they don't have books and whatever, computers. So I'm just thinking what the DPS is lacking. They lacking students too, because they all disappeared from school districts. So yeah, average parents here in Detroit is not thinking about woke and critical race theory and AP courses. They're looking for a school that's safe and that can educate their kids, and they have an issue with that.
Well, speaking of education, that was certainly something that Governor Gretchen Whitmer mentioned in the State of the State speech this week. She had many different areas that she focused on. One, of course, being the idea of more funding for preschool educational opportunities, talking about abortion, talking about gun control. What are the major takeaways from the State of the State speech?
I thought it was I thought she did a great job. I mean, sometimes she gets a little bit over dramatic, but I thought she did a really good job. And the funny thing was, she was trying to include. I mean, she was announcing all these great things, and the Republicans were like so sour-faced, like, oh, it's her idea. I mean, she got to the point where she said, well, who knows about the future with our children? Who knows? Maybe even the Lions might win the Super Bowl. And like the Democrats got up and the Republicans are like, no, we're not. And she's like, come on, everybody. I mean, she was really bending over backwards, and the Republicans looked so mad that they've lost control of the House, that they were so resistant. I think the only time they all stood up was maybe when she applauded the state police and the National Guard, where they were like, okay, all right, we'll give you that one.
May I invoke an old Eddie Murphy line for that case, which is, you brought that shit on yourself. And that's like, they have no one to blame but themselves. Yeah. So
I thought it was a brilliant ploy, because I think she can easily now say that the Republicans don't want to unite on anything. I mean, it's one thing to go ahead and say that half the room's Michigan, half the room's Michigan State. I know, Steve, it's okay. But the fact that we've only got one NFL team, and the entire legislature can't go ahead and come together on that, I thought that spoke.
Not like the Mets and the Yankees, or the Jets and the Giants, where you got. I mean, there were a few points that she was really, really trying to bring everyone to. She did a great job on the speech. There were a lot of very positive things she was bringing forward. Some tax breaks for seniors. She had a lot of stuff going on there, and I thought it was a very good delivery.
Do you think her speech was aimed at a broader audience? Let's call it a national audience.
She has never hidden her ambition, and I don't fault her for it, because finding an ambitious politician is like finding a rose that smells very good. It's just part of the job. So yeah, I think she's very clearly, I think her immediate denial that she was after Stabenow's seat I think was a big tell as to what she's really gunning for. And I think that's definitely true of this speech. Sorry.
Well, you know, Nancy,
running,
every rose has its thorn as well. So
she's running for president at the time. She'll go out there and test the water.
Right.
Although if Biden runs, I don't know how many challengers he'd get. Maybe Bernie might run again, but you know, I don't know. It'll be interesting. Yeah.
I read that he's expected to announce after the State of the Union.
Isn't he about 110?
He is. Bernie's even older than Biden.
I wrote the damn bill.
well, will that person who runs against Biden in the primaries be seen as a Ted Kennedy 1980?
Well, he killed Jimmy Carter. So
yeah.
I mean, is that a possibility? So wait to be seen. Well, Allan, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say when Gil Hill ran for mayor, they said he was too old, and he said, "Well, if I'm too old," he said, "Mary Ann Mahaffey just got reelected, and she was in college when I was in elementary school. Why is she not too old?"
Ouch. Okay, Allan, I think we're at that time of the show.
Downtown Detroit, Robert Wells, Schmuck of the Week.
All right. Yeah. Steve, you've got to have one, I know.
I have one, and it's a fairly common person and a common schmuck. But Marjorie Taylor Greene, to me, it's her, and then it's the entire Republican Party's ability to all of a sudden take her in their arms and, as Kim Weston used to say, take her in the arms and rock me a little while. You guys don't know who Kim Weston was, but Adolph does.
I do.
I know who Kim Weston is.
Anyway, she's my schmuck of the week, and I think it was the cherry on top of the Sunday was when there was this talk. You guys already mentioned it about she's going to be the vice presidential choice of Donald J. Trump. It's beyond my comprehension how someone who has said the things that she has said, and not just about the Jews, but about almost everybody, has now been able to advance to a position where they're going to put her on important committees. Can you even imagine having to sit there as an expert coming on whatever committee and talk to her and have her ask you questions? Can you even imagine what it'd be like? So she's my schmuck of the week.
I have to say, I was kind of.
She's on armed services. She can ask about those space lasers.
Right, the lasers that the Jews bring. That's right.
I was kind of shocked when maybe I misread it, but I was shocked to find out that she had attended college.
Marjorie Taylor Greene?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I mean,
well, there you go.
What, ITT Tech?
Wow.
Ooh, it just got a little bit cold in here. By the way, Steve, I think Rock Me, Take Me in Your Arms, Rock Me a Little While. Is that the Doobie Brothers?
No, Doobie Brothers.
Oh,
that song was out when Adolph and I were in high school. What are you? The Doobie Brothers weren't even born.
All right. But well, then maybe they covered it. But,
you know what I'm going to do? I'll go on YouTube. I'll get Kim Weston's version, and I'll send it to everybody other than Adolph because he already knows.
Okay.
And I think I'm the
Yeah.
only woman younger than Steve Fishman who might be willing to date him because I can pass the David Ruffin test.
Is that anything? Is that anything like the Alan Turing test? Or all right, Adolph, who's your schmuck of the week?
Greg Abbott from Texas, the wheelchair-bound governor, said, I can kick better, just as good as the Dallas Cowboys kicker, Brett Myers, who missed his fifth extra point. Somebody should, since he made a joke about him being in a wheelchair, you ever see an old movie with Richard Whitmer where he pushed the woman down the stairs in the wheelchair? He was a maniac killer. Somebody need to push Greg Abbott down the stairs.
Mm.
That guy, that guy is a real asshole.
Okay.
Well, there was a gremlin.
That was God intervening. I got him for 5 seconds. He agreed.
He didn't want me to talk about Greg Abbott. I'm sorry about that.
Well, I mean, after all, the Dallas Cowboys are God's football team, so maybe this is where you see that intervention happening. All right, Nancy.
I'm going to go with Mike Pompeo, who's new book is apparently sets the bar very low. In fact, it may actually dig a hole in the ground and set the bar even lower than it's already been in terms of its nastiness and its vile opinions and whatever else you want to say about it, including the fact that he apparently ran off to Saudi Arabia to assure Mohammed Bonesaw that we're not going to take any action over the murder of Jamal Khashoggi. He refers to journalists as hyenas and jackals, and is basically just a real piece of shit. So, Mike Pompeo.
Yeah, he actually said that Khashoggi was an activist who got his murder got far too much media attention.
Yes.
But he didn't deserve to die.
Yeah, he didn't deserve to be cut up and taken out of the Saudi embassy in a suitcase. But still. So.
But having a couple of wranglers take him out back and beat the piss out of him, that might be all
that
right.
would be okay,
yeah.
Right? Exactly.
All right, Allan.
I'm going to go with Meta/Facebook for allowing Trump back in. I mean, what the hell do you have to do? I mean, the guy is responsible or certainly played a role in an insurrection using, and the guy gets allowed back in. It's like, they're like he paid his dues or second chances. I'm sorry, the guy's still an asshole. He has no remorse. He's not apologizing for anything he's done. People get penalized on Facebook, and sometimes they're like, I have no idea what I did. This guy shits on everybody, and that's okay. This guy causes an insurrection, and that's come on back.
Well, Allan, you know that Facebook uses secret evidence in order to put you into Facebook jail.
Right.
I'm just saying. Well, thank you, Steve, for sending out the.
I just got my Kim Weston.
I got it as well, and the original recording was in 1964.
That's what I'm trying to tell you. That's what I'm telling you. Kim Weston was long before any singing with other people. She had that big hit.
Yes,
so,
and
you was in college then, right?
I was in the 10th grade at Mumford High.
School, right? Were you in law school in 64?
10th grade at Mumford High while you were going to Oak Park.
I wasn't even a conception or conceptualization at that point. All right. Well, Nancy, you actually had my primary schmuck of the week.
Well, and Lengel took my other one. So sorry,
well,
I don't have another one to give you.
Fear not, I do have one.
You have to have a backup.
My schmucks of the week are San Francisco Bay swimming zealots who apparently go around now wetsuit shaming people as they swim from Pier 39 out to Alcatraz Island. If you really are going to do this properly, you shouldn't need a wetsuit. So they go around actually bullying well-intended swimmers to get rid of their wetsuits. In fact, accosting one to the point that she was browbeaten into taking her wetsuit off while she was treading water, which I can imagine that in the San Francisco Bay, given how choppy it is, and of course trying to avoid Clint Eastwood swimming in the opposite direction as he's escaping Alcatraz, has got to be really difficult. So
a bunch of pussies they must have in the swimming community in San Francisco Bay that you couldn't stand up against somebody telling you that it's wrong to swim in 54-degree water in a wetsuit. Man, like
we're sending you there, Nancy. We're sending you to kick some ass.
I'll wear it.
All I know is I so right now miss Jerry Garcia because I know he would have come up with a song about this.
Yeah.
So there you go. Yeah, my schmuck of the week. Well, listen, again, thank you for a wonderful discussion. Thank you, Adolph Mongo. Thank you, Steve Fishman. Thank you, Nancy Derringer. And yet again, Allan Lengel with the last word.
Drive home safely.
Have a great week.